When I decided to start posting retro reviews to this channel, I created a list of movies that I would eventually like to cover. Now, whether or not I actually cover each of those movies remains to be seen, but the first movie that I actually put on that list was the subject of today's retro review, which is the 1987 Joel Schumacher teen vampire movie, The Lost Boys, starring Kiefer Sutherland, Jason Patric, Haim, Corey Feldman. Basically, some of the who's who of young 80s actors, and even though this movie is definitely just dripping with 80s cheese, it's a lot of fun and there's many timeless qualities to it too. So let's take a look at The Lost Boys. The movie begins with two brothers, Michael and Sam, moving with their mother Lucy to Santa Carla, California, a place in the movie that's referred to as the murder capital of the world. And 37 years since this movie was made, and California really hasn't changed that much. The family's staying with Lucy's father, and as the family settles in, the boys take the opportunity to explore the town. Sam goes into a comic book store where he meets two other boys around his age, the Frog brothers, Edgar and Alan. And these two are some of the funniest characters in this movie. And in fact, I think they're almost a satire of just young stars in dangerous situations for movies at the time, because back then, if you have a young cast in dangerous situations, as an audience member, you know that nothing's going to actually happen to them because they're not going to do anything to a bunch of children in a movie, so you can calm down. And it's almost like Edgar and Alan Frog seem to go through life with this mindset where they think because they're children, they're invincible, so nothing can happen to them. Corey Feldman's character, Edgar Frog specifically, kind of goes through the movie with the machismo that's completely unearned. He acts like he's a seasoned vampire hunter when he's really just over his head. He even talks with a gruff voice and a bandana on, and I've heard that Corey Feldman was supposed to be trying to mimic Rambo, and that's just the perfect representation of this character because in his mind, he is the main character and nothing can happen to him. Michael, on the other hand, pursues a girl he sees, and through her is introduced to David and his gang of 80s goths who turn out to be a group of vampires. And I really just love this touch that they did for the movie because they maintained the whole gothic aesthetic to vampires, kind of harkening back to the old days of the old vampire movies from like the early 20th century. So in a way, they're kind of bringing it into the modern day, but still trying to stay true to the vampire roots that we've seen in cinema in the past. And I can't go any further without talking about the character of David, played by Kiefer Sutherland, because he just knocked it out of the park with this movie. I really like Kiefer Sutherland, and this is probably one of my favorite roles of his, because he's just someone that you're just fixated on throughout the movie. He's just oozing with 80s cool, and one of the few people in the world, I would say, who can actually pull off a mullet. But throughout this whole movie, he has this charming charisma about him. It really reminds me of the old Dracula, how he's able to hypnotize people to do his will. David kind of has the same charisma about him, but it's just that 80s bad boy biker image that people are just kind of fixated on and just want to hang out with the cool kid. Michael begins hanging out with this group and is eventually brought back to their lair, which is an old destroyed hotel. While there, he's tricked into drinking blood, and it starts the process of him turning into a vampire. And this is something I really like with the movie, in that the process to becoming a vampire is not like it's an instantaneous thing, or it's not like you're infected with the vampire virus and all of a sudden someone flips a switch and you're a vicious blood-sucking vampire. It's a gradual transition with signs and symptoms along the way. The way the movie presents it is more akin to a teenager experimenting with drugs. Like, just think about it for a second. Michael moves to a new town, doesn't know anyone, falls in with the bad crowd, gets pressured into trying a substance that's ultimately harmful to him. Over time, his family starts noticing his personality change as he becomes more and more like a vampire, similar to how an addict will change as they fall deeper into their addiction. Sam is initially freaked out when he learns that his brother's becoming a vampire, and at the point in the movie when he finds out, he says one of my favorite lines of this movie.
You're a vampire, Michael. My own brother, a goddamn shit-sucking vampire. Oh, you wait till Mom finds out, buddy.
Of course, Sam doesn't want to have to kill his brother Michael, despite the Frog brother saying that he needs to stake him through the heart, and I really just love how casual he is about this whole thing. But since they decided not to do that, they work on another solution where the Frog brothers propose the idea that if you kill any vampire, then any vampire down the line that they created will revert back to humans. So instead, they team up with Michael to try to find the head vampire and kill that vampire in order to reverse what happened to him. And the kicker is, we don't actually know that these things will work. They just assume it'll work because, like all their other knowledge on vampires, they just got it from reading comic books. They might present themselves as seasoned vampire hunters, but they've never actually been in this situation before. They just read a bunch of comic books, so they think that's how things work in real life. That's where they got the idea that you use a steak, you use garlic, you use holy water. We even come to find out in the movie that some of these things don't actually work on vampires, but because this is an 80s movie and they're kids, they still ultimately come out on top. The final showdown with the vampires at Sam and Michael's place with the Frog Brothers was a fun time, with each person having some triumphant moment like you would expect from the hero characters in such a situation, complete with dumb 80s one-liners after taking out a vampire.
Death by stereo.
Of course, you still have that twist at the end because you have an 80s horror movie, so you need to have some type of twist at the end. But it really gets quickly resolved because even though this is an 80s horror movie, it's still a kid's adventure movie. So really, there's not too much of an issue for them. And after it gets resolved, then the movie just kind of ends. And that's really what I like about this movie, is it still has the spirit of the young children's 80s adventure movie, kind of in the same vein as The Goonies, but with a horror element slapped on top of it. And when the horror elements hit, they do pretty well. I love the design of the vampires when they transform into their vampire form. The gore effects, I think, look fantastic in the movie at the points that we actually see them. So not only is this just a fun adventure movie with a lot of good comedy to it, there's also just good horror elements mixed in with it as well. And that's what I like about this movie. I'm a fan of horror comedies, but then you slap an 80s adventure movie onto it, which is something that I also like. And it's just the perfect combination of the three. I don't know how they're able to make this work because this is something that they shouldn't be able to pull off. But for some reason they do, and I don't think this could be replicated even now. This feels like it's a movie that can only exist within this same time period, and I don't think you can actually do it again later on. I know they've tried to have sequels to The Lost Boys, but I've never actually watched those. The only thing I know about those movies is I knew someone who watched the second one, and he said it was beneath Corey Feldman for doing that movie, if that says anything. Maybe down the road, I'll actually watch those and do a review on those as well, because I am kind of curious just to see how bad it is, but I'm not expecting a whole lot. But as far as this movie goes, if especially you're a fan of The Goonies and you like that movie and you want to see kind of more of a horror element to that, then I'd recommend The Lost Boys. But even if you're not a fan of The Goonies particularly, but you just like horror comedies, then I'd recommend checking out this movie. Or if you're just a fan of 80s movies in general, especially those cheesy action movies, then you have to watch this one too. I mean, this just ticks all the boxes in every way. You got comedy, horror, adventure. And if you're a fan of any of those genres, then this is a movie for you. And that's why I'll recommend this one with a 9 out of 10. But let me know what you think about The Lost Boys in the comment section below, whether you like this movie or not. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news, or if you want to check out some more of my movie reviews. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that like button and share this video out there with your friends because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.